Hey friends, you pull the blanket over your shoulders, the quiet hum of the evening folding around you like soft linen. Outside your window somewhere, a moth taps gently against the glass, mistaking your reading lamp for the moon. You can almost smell rain on warm cobblestones and hear the faint creak of an ancient cart in a street that hasn't existed for centuries. There's a stillness here, just shy of dreaming. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. The air feels a bit older tonight, like it carries the scent of something forgotten. Maybe damp straw, maybe worse. You're not quite sure, but you step forward anyway, right into a world of flickering torchlight and half-slept footsteps. It starts with a slosh, not a dramatic one, just that quiet, heavy glug of something wet and unfortunate being dumped from a window onto the street below. Welcome to your new job. It's the middle of the night, and you're standing barefoot in a muddy alley behind a row of timber-framed houses in a small medieval English town around the year 1350. You might have dreamed of being a knight, a baker maybe, a monk if you were feeling quiet and mysterious, but no. You drew the short straw in life's slightly moldy raffle. You're a gong farmer now, which means you deal with human waste. The stuff in chamber pots, the sludge in cesspits, all of it. That's yours now. Congratulations. So why are you awake at this hour? Because nobody wants to see the work you do. It's a job that happens when the streets are empty, the candles snuffed out, and the respectable people are asleep behind thick shutters. That way, you can move about unseen, except by cats, rats, and the occasional drunkard face down in a puddle of ale and regret. Your night begins when the town goes dark. You slip out of your rented room, if you're lucky enough to afford one, and you grab your gear. Tonight, you're assigned to a row of houses just inside the eastern wall. There's a small network of backyard pits and privies that need emptying. And yes, it's exactly as glamorous as it sounds. You step into the first backyard, and the smell hits you like a friendly slap. It's a heady mix. Rot, ammonia, something faintly floral, probably someone's soap, and that deep, earthy funk that makes your nose crinkle before your brain even fully clocks what's going on. It smells alive, which is ironic, because everything about it could probably kill you. You lift the lid of the pit. It's stone-lined, old, and surprisingly full. You can't see the bottom, but you hear it gurgling softly. There's something about that sound that suggests it's not happy to see you. Here's a mainstream historical fact to brighten your day. In the Middle Ages, most houses didn't have flowing water or sewers. Instead, people used chamber pots indoors, then emptied them into small backyard pits or local ditches. These cesspits had to be cleaned out manually, and that's where you come in. You lower your long-handled shovel into the dark. It's more of a scoop than a spade, curved like a ladle but the size of your forearm. You're careful, very careful, not to fall in, because that actually happened to people. Not often, but enough that it became a kind of whispered urban legend among gong farmers. A man in Norwich supposedly drowned in one in 1325. Whether that's true or not, historians still argue whether it was accident or something more sinister. Apparently, he wasn't very well liked. Anyway, you get to scooping. The muck is heavier than you'd think. It resists, like dough or wet clay. Your arms start to ache in the first few minutes. The trick is to pace yourself. You've got 8 pits to do tonight, and none of them are going to apologize. You shovel it into your wooden tub, a low, wide thing with iron handles and sealed seams. The wood's stained black from years of use. You can never quite clean it fully. At some point, it just becomes what it carries. Here's your first quirky tidbit. Medieval towns sometimes referred to human waste euphemistically as night soil. Sounds almost poetic, doesn't it? Like something you might sprinkle in a moonlit garden. But no, it's exactly what you think it is. just with extra denial. Back to work. You fill the tub, then lift it carefully onto your little cart. It's a two-wheeled, low-slung thing with thick spokes and a dangerously squeaky axle. You'll wheel it out past the gatehouse later, toward the fields or the dumping grounds. But for now, you just trudge. Every now and then, someone throws open a shutter and glares down at you. Not because of the smell, really. Everyone smells like something in this town. No, it's the reminder of what you are. You're not quite untouchable, but you're not welcome at most taverns either. People pretend you don't exist, until they need you, which is often. The mud under your feet squelches like something alive. It's not just dirt. It's rainwater mixed with 1,000 forgotten things. Blood from the butchers, soot from the chimney sweep, a dropped apple, a dead bird, the ashes of someone's third husband. Medieval streets are messy like that. A dog barks somewhere. You pause, glance over your shoulder. Just a mutt chasing shadows. But you never quite relax out here. Because here's the thing, you're doing your job in near total darkness, with no one to help if something goes wrong. And there are accidents. Pits collapse. Lids break. People slip. Rats bite. There's no union. No compensation. Just a quiet burial and maybe a small, nervous prayer. You move to the next pit. It's deeper, and this one has a layer of froth on top that makes your stomach do a little flip. You think about dinner, barley porridge and a bit of onion, and regret it immediately. As you lower the shovel again, you try not to think too much. About anything. About the fact that your skin has started to itch in places you can't reach. About the warm trickle of something down your boot. About how the stars above you shine so indifferently on this whole mess. Your hands blister, your back tightens. And yet you keep going because if you stop, it doesn't get any cleaner. And because this job, as terrible as it sounds, pays better than many others. Better than weaving. Better than field work. Certainly better than starving. Still, there's something lonely about it. The way no one looks you in the eye during the day. The way kids run the other direction. The way even your name gets lost in the muck. People just call you Gong Farmer, like the title swallows the man. And yet, here you are, in the quiet of a medieval night, doing the job that keeps the city from drowning in its own filth. Unseen, unthanked, unbearably necessary. The second pit of the night is deeper than the last, and its edge is crumbling in a way that makes you suspicious. The wood frame around it has clearly seen better centuries. Someone tried to reinforce it with a broken door plank, and you're fairly certain it's the same door you noticed missing from the nearby alehouse. So that's where it went. You crouch down and test the ground with your heel. It holds, but just barely. You sigh, shift your grip on the long-handled scoop, and begin again. This is what your nights are, descending into muck, both literally and emotionally. The real cesspits, though, the ones that belong to the wealthier households, are often down below street level. Underground vaults designed to collect years' worth of human waste. These are your specialty. When people call in a proper Gong Farmer, it's because the pit's been full for months, maybe years, and the local apprentice has finally given up and run screaming. And this particular one, it's one of those. To get into the pit, you tie a stained wool scarf over your nose and mouth, not that it helps much, and start to descend using a rickety rope ladder. The walls are slick stone, mossy and wet, and as you go lower, the air thickens. It doesn't just smell bad, it feels heavy, like soup made from regret. You can barely breathe, your fingers sting from the ammonia in the air. It's not just unpleasant, it's actually dangerous. Mainstream historical fact. The buildup of gases like ammonia, methane, and hydrogen sulfide in enclosed cesspits made them incredibly toxic. People occasionally passed out from the fumes alone. Some died without even falling in. Just inhaling too deeply could trigger unconsciousness. Not the kind of thing you put on your medieval CV. You reach the bottom, careful not to step too hard. The surface is unstable, like walking on a jellyfish the size of a mattress. You don't want to imagine how deep this pit really goes, and yet someone has to empty it. You start scooping. It's slow, methodical, and honestly kind of meditative. If you ignore the stench, the dizziness, and the existential dread, the bucket above you waits patiently. You fill it, give the signal, and your assistant, some kid from down the street who's saving for a new pair of shoes, hauls it up on a rope pulley. The two of you won't talk during this job. You've found it's better that way. No one wants to say out loud what you're standing in. The only sounds are slop and splash, the gentle creak of the pulley, and the occasional muffled cough from above. Here's a fringe fact you might not know. Some gong farmers wore wide-brimmed hats, not to keep the sun off, but to catch falling waste or debris while working beneath privy chutes. Because yes, occasionally someone would forget you were down there and use the toilet anyway. Talk about bad timing. One time, a guy named Ralph, or maybe it was Walter, had an entire chamber pot land squarely on his head mid-shovel. He came out swearing oaths so colorful, even the bishop's cat went into hiding. From that day on, he insisted on working under a makeshift wooden shield. Looked like a turtle, smelled worse. Down in the pit, your arms go numb from the repetition. The worst part is how used to it you get. Your brain starts to drift. You wonder what it would be like to have a garden, maybe grow some leeks. You imagine a breeze, clean water, a tunic that hasn't been permanently ruined by mystery splatter. And yet, you know this work matters. It's gross, yes, but essential. Without you, the city would be ankle-deep in disease. People would walk through puddles that don't evaporate. Bread would mold faster. Air would curdle in their lungs. Historians still argue whether the medieval public truly appreciated the sanitation work being done in the shadows. There's little written praise, no poems about the noble scooper of sludge. But then again, maybe silence was its own reward. No news is good news, especially if it doesn't smell like fermented cabbage. After half an hour, you give the signal to climb out. Your assistant ties off the last bucket, and you pull yourself up, hand over hand, trying not to gag on the breeze that no longer feels like a breeze. It's more like damp fabric that's been steeped in outhouse tea. When you reach the top, your legs tremble. You and the boy dump the contents into the cart. It's nearly full now, an impressive load if you're keeping score. The pit, meanwhile, looks only slightly improved. There's always more people, more waste, more pits. The work never really ends, it just rotates. The cart is heavier now, creaking ominously under the weight. You grab the handles and pull, trudging back toward the gatehouse. The streets are quieter now, but not empty. You pass another gong farmer, his cart stacked higher than yours. You exchange a nod. A grim, slightly sour-smelling solidarity. That guy, old Tom you think his name is, once told you he found a gold ring in the muck, cleaned it off, sold it to a silversmith, and drank for free for a week. Another time, he pulled out what he swore was a small jawbone. Human, maybe. He tossed it back in. Didn't want to know. And that's the thing. You see things doing this job. You see what people throw away, what they lose, what they hide. Secrets end up in cesspits all the time. Notes, knives, bones, regrets. If you were curious, you could make a hobby out of medieval forensics. But you're not curious. You're tired. You reach the dump site outside town just as the sky begins to hint at dawn. The air is cold and raw. You tip the cart and everything sloshes out into a designated trench. Later, someone will cover it with straw or ash, but for now, it just steams like an angry soup. You stare at it for a moment, then turn away. Your shift's over. As you walk back through the quiet city, you notice the cats have returned. They slink through alleys and archways, chasing nothing. A few watch you pass with disinterest. You smell like their idea of a threat, or a snack. The baker's fire is already lit, and you catch the faint scent of bread rising. Wheat, salt, hope. It clashes violently with the layers clinging to your skin. You think about stopping in, but no, not yet. First, you need a wash, a nap, maybe a prayer. You return your cart to the storage shed, rinse your tools in the rain barrel, and strip down behind the curtain. The clothes will need boiling, again. You step into the basin, splash cold water over your arms, your neck, your face. It helps. A little. Later, wrapped in your scratchy blanket, you lie awake for a while. The smell never quite leaves. It lingers in your nose, your hair, your dreams. But the pit is empty now. The cart is lighter. And for tonight at least, the city breathes a little easier. You wake up just past midday, with the sun trying to melt its way through the tiny window above your head. The blanket clings to your skin, sticky with old sweat and last night's efforts. There's something uncomfortably poetic about a job that makes even your dreams smell like vinegar and wet ash. Stretching, you run a hand over your sore shoulders. Everything aches, from your elbows to your spine, as if your bones are slowly protesting the choices you've made. Or maybe they're just trying to evacuate your body like the waste you shovel. Hard to say. After a stiff breakfast of rye bread and whatever dried fruit hasn't been chewed by rats, you make your way toward the tool shed, your unofficial office. The tools are all there, each one silently judging you with their stained handles and permanently warped wood. Let's take inventory. There's the scoop, of course, your go-to. It's a long-handled, slightly curved wooden shovel, designed more for hefting than digging. The blade's been worn smooth from endless friction against stone-lined cesspits. You run your fingers over it and notice the faint gouges where something, not quite solid, bit back. Next to it, your buckets. Wide, squat things made from thick planks bound by rusting iron hoops. You're not sure if the black coating on the inside is pitch, soot, or just history that no one dares clean off anymore. You've also got your drag hoe, a metal hook attached to a wooden pole, used for scraping the sludge that refuses to move politely. This is your persuader, your coaxer, your, "Come on, it's 2 a.m. and I don't have time for your attitude" stick. Then there's your rope ladder, your only way in and out of deeper pits. Frayed at the edges, but still strong. You trust it like a nervous friend. You know it won't drop you on purpose, but also that it might forget itself if you've eaten too much barley porridge lately. And then there's the oddball in the bunch. A curved iron spoon with a handle like a shepherd's crook. No one knows exactly what it was made for. Some say it's for scraping the last of the pit from the corners. Others think it's a relic from the days when gong farming and alchemy were awkward cousins. You mostly use it for poking suspicious mounds to make sure they're not still alive. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Gong farmers were legally required in many medieval towns to carry specific tools, especially when working near public streets. The assumption was that having the right gear meant they wouldn't make a bigger mess than necessary, which, to be fair, was a constant danger. One wrong move, and your night soil turns into a surprise street performance. But owning the right tools wasn't cheap. You either inherited them, lucky you, or bought them second-hand from a retiring farmer. Retiring in this context usually meant not dead yet, but certainly halfway there. And that brings us to the weird economics of the whole thing. You wouldn't expect it, but gong farmers actually got paid relatively well. In London, some earned 6pence a day, more than many laborers. Of course, they also spent more on soap, ale, for coping, and occasionally bribes to make the smell go away, either through actual potions or priestly promises. One of the fringe tidbits that gets passed around is the tale of a gong farmer who tried to patent a perfume, called it Privy Rose, claimed it masked the worst odors and tickled the lady nostrils like spring dew. No one knows if it worked, but he did disappear suddenly after a noblewoman fainted into a haystack during testing. Coincidence? Maybe. Anyway, your tools are your livelihood, and you keep them in decent shape, sharpening edges, oiling the wooden handles, occasionally muttering apologies when you drop them. Some people polish swords. You polish a poop scoop. Same pride, different battlefield. You sling the tools over your shoulder and head out again. It's nearly dusk, and your shift's about to start. You make your way toward the carts, the real beasts of the business. Your cart, named Bess for reasons you don't like to explain, is a wobbly, two-wheeled creature with iron rims and groaning wooden slats. You've repaired her yourself with salvaged nails and leather scraps. She leans to the left, always, like she's permanently unimpressed with the world. You grease the wheels and double-check the harness. Some towns made gong farmers wear bells, the way lepers did, to warn others they were approaching. Your town isn't that strict, yet, but you can feel the policy hovering in the air, like a pending storm. You know you're not welcome in the baker's line, or the alehouse, or even the church, really. People say it's not you, it's the smell. But you know better. It's not just what clings to your tunic, it's what you remind them of. There's a strange duality to the job. You're both essential and invisible. Without you, streets overflow, homes fester. But with you around, people are reminded that under every floorboard, behind every curtain, there's a pipe dream of rot just waiting to rise. You finish loading the cart and sit on the edge for a moment, catching your breath. The sunset over the town's east wall glows red-orange, and for a second, everything feels quiet, peaceful. Then the wind shifts and brings a whiff from the last dump trench, and the moment folds itself back into the usual. Before you start tonight's route, you check your newest addition, a lidded bucket with brass clasps, part of a failed invention by a tanner-turned-engineer, supposed to seal in the stench. Instead, it seals in pressure. The last time you opened it too fast, it made a sound like a dying goose and sprayed something that permanently changed your relationship with meat pies. Historians still argue whether medieval towns ever really had a standard for sanitation tools. Some claim ordinances existed, detailing exactly what a gong farmer had to wear, carry, and clean. Others think those documents were more wishful thinking than actual law. You've never seen one, and frankly, you wouldn't follow it if you did. Because at the end of the day, or the middle of the night more accurately, you don't care what the parchment says. You care about grip strength, cart balance, and whether that suspicious bubbling in pit number 7 means you're about to get very, very wet. Your job is dirty, dangerous, and deeply underappreciated. But your tools are ready, the moon is rising, and Bess, bless her creaky frame, is eager to roll. The coin hits your palm with a quiet clink, and for a brief moment you forget the smell. Not completely, of course. Nothing short of divine intervention, or possibly a really aggressive thunderstorm, can wash that off. But still, silver is silver, and in this trade, it's heavy with more than just metal. It's proof you made it through another week of pits, carts, and hazards that most people can't even look at without retching. You tuck the coin into a pouch sewn deep inside your tunic. You learned early not to keep money where the job might find it. One unlucky tip of the cart, and suddenly your entire week's pay is floating on top of something that used to be stew. That lesson cost you 3 groats and your last ounce of patience. The economics of gong farming are weirdly respectable if you squint hard enough. You get paid more than some craftsmen, definitely more than shepherds, and way more than the guy who spends all day hammering horseshoes and dreams about knees that still bend. Mainstream historical fact. In 14th century England, gong farmers often earned as much as 6 pence a night, a solid wage for laborers of the time. Compare that to the 2 or 3 pence a carpenter might make in a day, and suddenly, shoveling human waste sounds like a hot ticket to modest prosperity. So why isn't there a waiting list for this job? Well, let's review. You are actively avoided in public. People cross the street when they see you. Children whisper stories about your curse. You are not invited to weddings. Even your landlord makes you leave your boots outside, because no matter how many times you rinse them, they still smell like someone buried shame in them. And it's not just the social isolation. The job slowly undoes you. Your back begins to crook. Your lungs start to burn from years of ammonia. Your hands crack, blister, and harden until even warm bread feels like sandpaper. That's where the economics get philosophical. You do get paid more, but you also spend more. More on salves, on medicine, on ale that numbs your nose and memory just enough to get through the next night. You pay for water from the public bathhouse, for vinegar to scrub your clothes, for prayers from a priest who visibly flinches when you enter. You remember once, about a year ago, a fishmonger told you that a decent pair of boots cost 10 pence. 10. You laughed so hard you choked on your own breath. For that much, you told him, the boots better walk themselves home. He didn't laugh. Probably because you were dripping from a fresh job and standing too close to the pickled herring. You've learned not to make jokes while still in uniform. Still, there's something odd about how people need you, even as they pretend you don't exist. Everyone wants clean streets. No one wants to think about how they stay that way. You're the human curtain, pulled across the mess to keep life looking proper. One fringe tidbit you've picked up from chatting with fellow muckmen. Some folks believe that gong farmers were immune to disease. Too filthy to get sick, they said. You scare the illness away. Complete nonsense, of course, but you've met more than a few folks who thought your job somehow gave you special protection. One even asked if he could rub your sleeve before traveling to a plague-ridden town. You didn't let him, obviously. That sleeve had seen things. But it does raise the question, if this job is so risky, so low in status, why does it pay better? Historians still argue whether this higher pay was out of desperation, cities needing anyone, to do the work, or if it was a rudimentary form of hazard compensation, like danger pay with a smell tax. Either way, it means your purse has a bit more jingle than most. You get to eat more than just porridge. You sometimes even afford meat. On good weeks, you buy apples not already chewed by bugs. Of course, money can't buy you respect. Not here, not in this profession. But it can buy soap scented with thyme and cloves. Not that it helps much. Mostly you just end up smelling like cloves that died in a puddle behind a tannery. You once considered quitting, just walking away, becoming a porter maybe, or apprenticing with a cobbler. But then you met a former gong farmer with 3 missing toes and a cough that sounded like he swallowed a flute sideways. He said, "Stick with it. You'll die sooner, but better fed." You believed him. The city relies on you more than it admits. Without someone to cart away the waste, cesspits overflow, houses flood with things no one wants to name, and the rats, oh the rats, begin to dance. You've seen it. The results of neglect. A pit left too long becomes a source. It doesn't just sit there quietly. It spreads into cellars, into walls, into the cracks beneath floorboards where polite people live. There was a tavern once, just south of the bridge, where they ignored the signs. Said their pit could wait another week. That week turned into 3. And one night, while a bard was midway through a terrible love ballad, the backroom floor caved in, and half the bar fell into what could only be described as history's worst stew. Took 2 days to recover the furniture. The bard moved to York. And yes, you got paid to clean that up. Double rate. But you didn't speak for 2 days afterward. Not because of trauma, because the smell singed your throat. You push your cart now with a bit more purpose. The rattle of coin in your pouch reminding you that, for all its horrors, this job is a job. You can buy food. You can repair your cart. You can pay the boy who helps you haul buckets. He wants to be a scribe one day. You told him to start practicing the phrase, "Please don't fall in," just in case he writes your biography. As the sun dips behind the crooked rooftops, you see a group of apprentices heading home, their laughter echoing down the alley. One of them catches your eye, then looks away, awkward. You smile, just a little. You've seen him retching into the bushes last week when a rat jumped out of his cloak. "Better you than me," he mutters under his breath. But you're not sure anymore, because even if you're not admired, not clean, not even welcome in polite company, you're paid, you're needed, and deep down, beneath the reek and routine, there's something almost satisfying about that. You glance at your stained hands, your coin pouch, your clattering cart. You know the price you pay. But sometimes, on nights like this, it almost feels like a fair deal. You turn the corner just as the city's bells chime faintly in the distance. Not church bells exactly, just the dull clang of metal on metal from the watchtower, marking the change from early dusk to full-on night. The streets have emptied fast. That's the rule. Once the sky slips from orange to soot gray, everyone with any sense is off the roads and behind a bolted door, which of course makes it the perfect time for your rounds. Tonight's route takes you through the older part of town, where the buildings lean like old drunkards and the alleys are just wide enough to wedge your cart through sideways. You know this district well. Every curve, every suspicious dip in the cobblestone, every privy that creaks like it's judging you. You rattle through the back lanes, where the real guts of the city hide. Behind the bread stalls and churches and polite inn yards, there's this intestinal system of yards, alleys, and cesspits. It's here out of sight, where waste collects and stews and ferments into something far more civic than anyone wants to admit. You stop behind a row of tenant houses, cramped, overstuffed places where entire families live in 2 rooms. The kind of homes where laundry and secrets hang from every beam. These houses share a communal cesspit, an old one, probably installed back when the town was still young enough to believe one pit would last forever. It hasn't. It's bloated like an overripe fig. You eye it warily, and here's the bureaucratic wrinkle. This pit belongs to the city, not to any one tenant, which means your work tonight is officially sanctioned. You have a writ from the clerk's office with a wax seal and everything. Fancy if you ignore the smear in the corner that looks suspiciously like gravy. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval cities, local councils and aldermen managed waste collection through designated routes and schedules. They even kept ledgers of cesspit inspections, and failure to maintain a pit could lead to fines. In places like York or London, the wrong kind of stench could trigger a civic complaint, faster than a broken window or a wayward goose. You unfold the letter, mostly for show, and glance at the names. A few are scribbled in with thick charcoal, last-minute additions. One of them is crossed out, which is either a good sign or a bad one. You never know with medieval city clerks. Their handwriting is as suspicious as their math. You set your tools down beside the pit and rap lightly on the back door. A head pokes out. It's a woman with her hair wrapped in a kerchief, eyes wary. Came to clear the pit, you say. She doesn't reply, just nods and disappears inside. That's usually how it goes. No thank you, no pleasantries. Just open the door and don't ask questions. You pry up the pit's wooden cover, heavy, warped, and suspiciously damp. The scent rises like a sermon. Strong, undeniable, and absolutely not the kind that brings people together. You cough once, out of instinct more than anything, and tie your scarf tighter. This pit's seen better centuries. It's not lined with stone like some of the wealthier ones. Just compacted earth, reinforced with planks that are now soft and crumbling. A few of them have given up entirely and sunk into the mess below. You prod one with your drag hoe and it shudders like it's considering rebellion. You begin the work, slow and steady. The scoop sinks with a faint pop. The texture thick and oddly grainy. It's not the worst you've seen. That honor still goes to the time you cleaned a pit behind a butcher's apprentice dormitory during a heat wave. Tonight's work is simple, if tedious. Fill a bucket, hoist it, dump it into the cart, repeat. You count the loads in your head, a quiet rhythm that keeps your mind occupied. 4 loads in, you pause to rub your shoulder. That's when you hear it. A soft clatter from the end of the alley. You freeze. Not rats, not tonight. This sounds heavier. Metal on stone. Maybe a blade, maybe just a dropped horseshoe. But out here, where the city forgets itself after dark, you don't take chances. You grip the scoop's handle like a club and step slowly toward the sound. A shadow peels itself away from the wall. Not a robber, just a drunk. Or at least someone doing an incredible impression of a laundry sack with legs. He stumbles past you, murmurs something about mushrooms and betrayal, and disappears into the dark. You exhale and lower the scoop. Back to work. Fringe tidbit time. Some city ordinances required gong farmers to register their routes with the local bailiff to prevent night mischief. Apparently, sneaking around with a cart full of waste in the dark looked suspicious. And to be fair, there was one gang in the mid-1300s that used poop carts to smuggle stolen goods. They'd hide jewelry in sealed pots and disguise themselves as gong farmers. Got caught when one of them dropped a bracelet into a well. You think about that sometimes. The intersection between sanitation and smuggling. You briefly consider hiding something in your cart just to see if anyone would ever check, but no one would want to touch it, even if they suspected. You're invisible, and your cart is your shield. Still, there are moments you feel the weight of the city's infrastructure pressing down on you like a roof beam with a grudge. Every alley you trudge through is built atop pipes, pits, and contracts. Most people think the roads just stay clean, that someone waves a broom. They don't realize there's an entire system below them, a dirty, dangerous, deeply human system. Historians still argue whether medieval sanitation systems were more organized than we give them credit for. Some say the mess was constant chaos, random men with carts and shovels and very little oversight. Others point to civic records, legal codes, and waste collection maps as evidence of a surprisingly structured setup. You know the truth is somewhere in between. It's organized, yes, but just barely. Like a juggler who's good at what he does, but also on fire. Your final load goes into the cart with a satisfying thump. You scrape the edge of the pit with your hook, tidy it as best you can, and lower the lid. It won't stay shut properly. You weigh it down with a brick and hope for the best. The tenants will be grateful, silently of course, with fewer flies, maybe less illness, maybe. You never know if your work prevents disaster or just delays it, but you do it anyway, because it needs to be done. As you pull your cart out of the alley, the bells chime again. 2 hours to midnight, 3 more pits to go, and the moon, pale and uninterested, watches you roll past. Like she knows you're holding the city's guts together one bucket at a time. You hear it before you see it. A sharp argument echoing out of a cramped stone doorway, half muffled by laundry lines and dripping eaves. The voices are low but tense, and the words, though obscured by distance, carry that unmistakable tone. Someone's accused someone else of stealing something. You're not really interested. You're hauling 70 pounds of other people's secrets in your cart. You've got your own problems. But then a word cuts through the night and stops you in your tracks. Dung. Now, under normal circumstances, hearing someone yell, "You stole my dung," would register somewhere between amusing and mildly alarming. But in your world, this is serious business. You turn into the alley, cart creaking behind you like a groaning ox, and spot the commotion. 2 men stand chest to chest, red-faced and snorting like they're about to duel with chamber pots. Between them lies a barrel, half full of waste, clearly too fresh to have been sitting long. One of them points at the other, shouting, "He came round the back and took it, right out the pit." You'd laugh if this wasn't so close to your line of work. Actually, you have laughed about this before, with other gong farmers at the watering hole, telling stories of pit thieves and waste pirates. They always sounded exaggerated, until now. Here's a quirky but true historical tidbit. Stealing human waste was an actual crime in medieval towns. Certain types of waste, especially from wealthier homes, could be resold as fertilizer, or in some rare cases, processed in tanneries. Waste was a weird kind of currency, and where there's value, there's theft. You never thought you'd witness a turf war over a partially filled latrine barrel, but welcome to your Tuesday. City bylaws even had clauses about unauthorized removal of night soil. The reasoning was practical. If everyone started taking waste without regulation, the already fragile sanitation system would collapse under its own filth. More than once, the town council had to send an officer, usually the least favorite one, to sort out who had the right to what pile of muck. You lean against your cart and watch the spectacle. One of the men, older, with a beard that could hide a pigeon, gestures wildly toward the pit behind his house. "I've paid my pence," he growls. "That's my share. You can't just come scoopin'." The other man, younger and clearly used to fast exits, sneers. You left it, that makes it fair game. Like river driftwood, except warmer. That argument could spiral for hours. You decide to interrupt. Either of you gents file for a waste permit this week? You ask mildly. They both freeze and turn. You watch the realization settle into their faces like thick soup. One man mumbles something about forgetting. The other just looks sheepish. It's the universal face of two people who suddenly remember that sanitation law does exist. And they're standing right in the middle of it. You wave it off. Not my mess, you say, gesturing at the cart. I've got enough of that already. They don't thank you. No one ever does. But they do quiet down and drag the barrel out of the alley, muttering accusations under their breath like curses disguised as to-do lists. You've seen worse fights, usually over drainage rights or whose privy overflowed into whose cellar. The bureaucracy around waste is its own swampy maze. In theory, the town keeps track of everything. Which house has what kind of cesspit, how often it should be emptied, who's responsible for upkeep. In practice, most of those records are inaccurate, missing, or written in Latin no one remembers how to read. Mainstream historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, many cities in England and Europe had official waste disposal laws, complete with penalties and city-employed muck collectors. There were guilds in some places even, though they didn't throw elaborate balls, just slightly less miserable meetings about shoveling logistics. You once saw the town bailiff himself slip into a privy argument between two butchers. Their respective pits had backed up into the alley, forming a small lake of undetermined origin. The bailiff took one look, gagged, and ruled in favor of whichever man promised to clean it first. Justice by nose. Still, despite the mess and the bickering, you have to admit, there's a strange beauty in how organized some of it is. The city, your city, is held together by invisible threads. Not just laws and fines, but routine. You, for example, have a logbook in your cart. Rough leather cover. Holds your route, your regular pits, any complaints, and how many loads you hauled. You write in it with a stub of charcoal, and your handwriting looks like something a tired chicken left behind. But it's a system. Sometimes you wonder if it's too organized. You heard rumors once about a man who forged a privy cleaning license, claimed to be a certified gong master, got access to noble estates, cleaned pits that didn't need cleaning. Some say he was after valuables. Others think he just really liked the work. Historians still argue whether he was a con artist or just extremely enthusiastic about public health. Back in your alley, you finish loading your current haul and brace your cart for the next stop. A wealthy townhouse on the northern edge. They have a private pit, lined with clean stone and, miracle of miracles, a brick path to get there so your boots don't sink into mystery mud. But even with the nice surroundings, the job is the same. You lift the lid, release the funk, and start the rhythm. Scoop, lift, dump, scoop, lift, dump. The only difference is that here, they pay you extra to whistle while you work. They think it's charming. They imagine sanitation as something quaint and rustic, as if your job is just rustic gardening. You indulge them, because their coin spends the same as anyone's, and they give it to you with gloved hands, held out like they're feeding a goat. Once, you overheard a merchant's daughter refer to you as the Night Man. She said it like you were part ghost, part myth. You rather liked that. Better than the stink-footed scooper, which a different child shouted at you near the fish market last month. You finish your rounds in silence. The city has gone fully still now, its noises tucked away in hearths and bedchambers. Only the occasional cat moves across your path, too busy with its own business to judge yours. You dump your final load into the assigned trench behind the old tannery. It hisses when it lands, still warm. You stand there for a moment, letting the silence soak into your skin, which already holds everything else. Then you turn for home, cart empty, thoughts not quite so. The laws, the guilds, the petty thefts and turf wars, all of it spins behind you like flies over a too warm bucket. But that's someone else's problem now. For tonight, your part is done. You hate rats. Not in the way you hate splinters or weak ale, or that one innkeeper who pretends not to see you when you wave. No, your hatred of rats is bone deep, personal. They've followed you through every shift, every alley, every cesspit. You've had them fall on you, run across your boots, and once, memorably, gnaw through your cart harness while you were shoulder deep in a wealthy merchant's latrine. You still twitch when you hear chewing, and the thing is, they love night work as much as you do. You're back on the street now, your cart half full and creaking like it's been cursed by a particularly passive-aggressive priest. The moon overhead is doing its best impression of a flickering lantern behind smoke. Even in full dark, the streets feel alive, but not with people, with whispers, skittering feet, flutters of wings, the small noises that cities make when they're pretending to sleep. This is your time, the gong hour, as some call it, though never to your face. You work under cover of night because the law says it's cleaner that way. Not for you, for everyone else. No one wants to see the business end of their daily habits hauled past them while they buy turnips. Fair. Mainstream historical fact. Gong farmers were required by law in many medieval towns to work strictly at night. Some places issued curfews for waste carts, limiting them to specific hours after sunset and before sunrise. It wasn't about sanitation, really. It was about invisibility. So here you are, cloaked in shadows and mule sweat, doing the work no one wants to see. You've learned how to move quietly, how to ease your cartwheels over stones that wobble, how to step past sleeping dogs and puddles that smell suspiciously like last week's eels. But you're not alone out here, you rarely are. The rats come first, noses twitching, eyes glowing like evil beads in the dark. They slip from cracks in the walls, scamper over roof tiles, and loiter near your cart like it's the hottest tavern in town. You hiss at one and it just blinks at you. They know the smell. It's their siren song. There are other things too. Creatures of the night with longer legs and shadier intentions. You've been followed before, once by a drunk who thought your cart was a rolling wine barrel, and once by someone who asked way too many questions about your route and whether or not you lock your shed. You do now. You also carry a short iron rod tucked under your belt. Not officially part of the job description, but it's amazing how useful it is when negotiations get weird in the dark. Tonight, the streets feel unusually quiet, not peaceful, quiet like the breath before a sneeze. You pause at the corner near the chapel ruins and listen. Somewhere in the distance, a dog lets out one sharp bark, then nothing. You step into the courtyard of your next assignment. It's one of the older inns, a squat building with peeling plaster and ivy climbing the walls like it's trying to escape. The privy is tucked around the back, between a lean-to full of firewood and what used to be a stable. You're about to get started when you hear something, a wet squelch that doesn't come from your cart. You freeze, heart thudding. You slowly peer around the edge of the stable, and there it is, a man, or what used to be one. Not dead, but certainly regretting his life choices. He's hip-deep in the inn's cesspit, clinging to the edge like a shipwreck survivor. His expression is 1 part terror, 2 parts apology. "Help," he says, and you wince. Not out of sympathy, just because he opens his mouth at all. The fumes are strong enough to make your eyes water from 10 feet away. You grab a rope from the cart and toss it to him. He catches it after a few flailing attempts, and you haul him out, with the same care you'd use for a very full, very wobbly bucket. He lands on the ground, coughing and sobbing, covered in the worst kind of history. You give him a minute. Then, because you're curious and maybe a little vindictive, you ask, "What were you doing in there?" He blinks, wipes muck from his eyes, and mutters, "Dropped my dice." You stare at him. "Loaded," he adds, like that explains everything. It kind of does. You've heard of cesspit divers before, usually thieves, sometimes gamblers. Once, a jilted lover who tossed her ex's favorite boots down there and went after them herself. You'd laugh if it weren't so sad, and if you didn't know the pit gases could knock a person out in minutes. That brings us to the real danger of this job. Not just the smell or the stains or the judgmental stares. No, it's the miasma. You've felt it before. That sudden wave of dizziness. The way your lungs burn after a deep breath in a particularly ripe chamber. The soft buzz in your ears that makes you wonder if you're about to faint or just have an idea. Historical mainstream fact. Medieval folks believed in miasma, bad air, heavy with corruption, as a major cause of disease. They weren't entirely wrong. While they didn't know about bacteria, they did know that pits gave off gases that made people sick. Hydrogen sulfide, methane, ammonia, none of them particularly welcome in the lungs, and those gases, thick and invisible, collect in low places, just like shame or mud. You learn to breathe through your mouth and take shallow sips of air, too deep, and you're the next cautionary tale. You drag the now shivering man toward the well and dump a bucket over him. He yelps. You toss him another. No point being gentle now. He staggers off without thanks, trailing stink across the cobblestones. You finish cleaning the pit. It's not a big one, just a narrow, stone-lined shaft that probably hasn't seen proper maintenance in a year. But it's deep. You shovel carefully, watching the surface wobble like pudding on a bad day. One wrong step and you're in the same trouble as Dice Boy. You scoop, dump, repeat. The cart grows heavier, the air feels thicker. You pause to drink water from your flask, a luxury, and wipe your brow. There's something beautiful about the quiet here. Not silence exactly, but the kind of calm that only comes when everything else has gone to sleep. And the only thing moving is you and your tired cart. The wind shifts. You catch the scent of bread, faint and soft, from a bakery 2 streets over. It blends with the muck in your nose until you almost forget what's good anymore. Your brain stops sorting the smells. It just accepts them. And in that strange, sleepy moment, you almost admire the simplicity of your life. You shovel another load. You scare off another rat. You wipe your hands on your apron and head for the next stop. Because even in the dark, even in the muck, the city needs you. And the night isn't over yet. There's something deeply unsettling about the sound of earth giving way beneath your boots. Not a dramatic cave-in, not yet. Just that subtle crook of packed dirt relaxing in all the wrong places. It's a sound you've learned to fear. Because when that sound happens next to a cesspit, it doesn't mean you're about to fall into a secret tunnel filled with treasure. It means you're standing above something that very much wants to eat you. You freeze, half-scooped bucket in hand. The ground twitches again, like it's breathing. Slowly, unhappily, you step back. The surface settles, innocent now, like it didn't just threaten to open its jaws and swallow you cart first. You exhale through your teeth and mark the spot with a broken tile from nearby. You'll warn the others later. For now, you've got half a dozen more loads to move and a very disinterested moon overhead. Medieval pits were not architectural marvels, especially not the older ones. These weren't designed with longevity in mind. Most were dug hastily, lined with whatever was lying around, stones, clay, discarded chunks of wall, and then topped with wooden planks that rotted faster than an unrefrigerated fish pie. Some pits were several feet deep and wide enough to host a dinner party, if you had enemies. Others were narrow, crumbly shafts that barely qualified as a hole. Mainstream historical fact. Cesspits, often unlined, were prone to collapse as waste saturated the soil and weakened nearby foundations. Entire portions of buildings could sink or tilt due to poorly managed waste infrastructure. And people, unlucky, unfortunate people, fell in. There's a famous case out of London, circa 1326. A man was reportedly sitting on his privy seat when the structure collapsed underneath him. He fell into the pit and drowned before anyone could haul him out. Historians still argue whether it was structural failure or just appallingly bad carpentry. Either way, it became a sort of cautionary tale about cheap wood and large lunches. You've never fallen in, thank the saints, but you've come close. Once, in an alley near the East Gate, the plank you stepped on cracked like dry bone. You managed to jump back, but the sound it made when it snapped, followed by the slow slurping glop of the hole reabsorbing itself, still lives rent-free in your spine. There's a particular kind of fear that comes with this job. It's not the screaming, runaway kind. It's slow, creeping, just under the skin fear. The kind that knows the ground isn't guaranteed. That air might turn on you. That one bad breath could end the whole story. Because then there's the miasma. You've heard the word from clerics, from physicians, from old women who stir herbs in boiling water and mutter prayers. Miasma, bad air, thick, corrupted, putrid atmosphere that leaks from decay and spreads illness like ink in water. They're not wrong exactly. The air in a cesspit can make your eyes burn, your throat tighten. It wraps around your lungs and whispers, "You shouldn't be breathing this." And yet, you have to. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some medieval gong farmers believed that chewing certain herbs, like rosemary, mint, or even raw garlic, could protect them from miasma. Whether it worked is debatable, but you do carry a pouch of dried mint leaves in your tunic, and you chew them between pits. It doesn't protect your health so much as give your nose something else to do. Tonight, the air feels particularly cruel. You're downwind of 3 fresh dumps, and a storm is brewing to the north. You can feel it in your joints. Storms stir the pits. The pressure shifts, and suddenly everything that's been peacefully fermenting decides to rise up and introduce itself. The last time that happened, you watched a low trench burble like a cauldron and then spew a cloud so thick it turned into fog. People thought the town was on fire. You had to explain, gently, that it was just a particularly enthusiastic privy venting its opinions. People moved out of that district for 2 weeks. You made good money. You're scraping out another pit now, this one behind a bakery of all places, and the contrast is a cruel joke. The scent of warm bread fights for dominance against something that could probably be weaponized. You gag once, just once. You've trained yourself well, but still, the sting sits behind your eyes. You're deep into it when your assistant, a wiry boy named Matt, runs up holding a small lantern and looking pale. "Cartwheel cracked," he says. "Too full, she's leaning." You wipe your forehead and sigh. That cart's been threatening to die for weeks. You knew this would happen eventually. You nod and follow him back. Sure enough, Bess the cart is sagging to the left, her wheel rim split like a dried apple slice. You check the damage and mutter a few words not suitable for a churchyard. "Can we fix it?" Matt asks. You chew your mint leaf and consider. "Maybe," you say, "or we pray for a miracle and hope the town mule is bored." You end up flagging down the night watch and borrowing a plank from the carpenter's rubbish pile. With a bit of effort and 2 feet of rope, you patch the wheel well enough to limp through the rest of the night. It squeaks like a wounded bird, but it rolls. Matt looks at you like you just tamed a dragon. You don't correct him. You continue your rounds. The pits don't wait. Some are polite and shallow. Others fight you, sloshing back and threatening to spill. You dodge a rat the size of a boot. You find a perfectly preserved doll head in one pit. Its eyes are wide open. You leave it there. Some things are better left buried. The miasma lingers in your clothes, in your hair, in your dreams. You sometimes wake up coughing, not loudly, just a dry, persistent sound, like your lungs are trying to turn the page. Historians still argue whether the medieval obsession with miasma was more superstition than science. But the numbers don't lie. Cities that manage their waste better, more pits, more regulations, more night work like yours, saw fewer outbreaks of disease. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. And so you keep going, one pit at a time, one step above the swamp. By the time the stars fade and the sky turns to ashes, your cart is full again, your boots are soaked, and your shoulders are lined with invisible bruises. But you didn't fall in. The earth didn't win tonight. The air didn't steal your breath. And sometimes, in this job, that's all you can really ask for. You finish rinsing your hands in a bucket of rainwater that smells like moss and faint regret. It doesn't do much, of course. The grime clings like guilt, and the stench, Well, the stench just laughs at soap, but it's habit now, part of your end-of-pit ritual. Scoop, dump, scrub, rinse, repeat. You've got patterns for everything, and they're what keep you sane in a world that doesn't want to acknowledge you exist. Tonight, though, the smell feels heavier. Not worse exactly. There's not much worse left to compare it to, but layered, like something's lurking beneath the usual notes of excrement, rot, and damp wood. It's sweet in a way that makes your stomach turn. You sniff again, still there. You sigh. Another case of medieval medicine meets practical reality. See, back in the day, and you're living proof, it was widely believed that bad smells could carry sickness, and not just any smells, but corrupted air, born from decay. This was the theory of miasma, of course, and it ruled the world of medicine like a drunk uncle at a family feast. Loud, mostly wrong, and very hard to ignore. Mainstream historical fact. Until the rise of germ theory centuries later, physicians believed diseases like the plague, dysentery, and typhoid were caused by bad air rather than microscopic organisms. This belief shaped everything from city planning to how people treated fevers. If it stank, it was dangerous, and the answer was usually herbs or fire. Which brings you to the alley where you now stand, watching a man in an expensive-looking tunic waving a smoking bundle of sage near the edge of a cesspit. You blink, you say nothing. He turns to you, eyes watering, and says, "It keeps the death air away. I read it in a manuscript." You nod slowly. You've seen this before. People lighting candles, hanging bundles of lavender, even waving around a live chicken in desperation. There was one time a baker covered his pit with rose petals until rats built a nest in them. Took 3 months to sort out. "You'll want to stand upwind," you say gently. He doesn't. He coughs once. The sage continues smoldering. The pit, unimpressed, bubbles quietly. You get back to work, shoveling methodically, while the man mutters a Latin prayer. You don't have the heart to tell him it's upside down. His intentions are good, misguided, but good. You remember another story, passed around among gong farmers, like a joke that's just a little too true. A town physician once tried to install copper funnels above every cesspit to redirect foul vapors heavenward. It worked exactly once, before a heavy rainstorm turned the system into a musical sewer pipe that flooded 3 homes and permanently damaged the parish choir's practice hall. Fringe tidbit. In a few towns, local apothecaries would sell plague pomanders, small perforated balls filled with spices, herbs, or vinegar-soaked cloths, meant to hang near latrines and ward off illness. They didn't work, obviously, but they smelled slightly better than the alternative. You once wore one around your neck until it fell in a pit. You didn't try to retrieve it. You dump another load into your cart and stretch your back. Something pops. Possibly your spine. Possibly the wooden board you're standing on. Matt, your assistant, catches up, clutching his ribs from laughter. He asked if burning garlic would help, he wheezes. "Garlic," you grunt. "Only if you throw it at the pit." He wipes his eyes. "Should we tell him?" You shake your head. "He paid you, didn't he?" Matt nods. "Half a penny. Then he bought the right to feel smart for one night." You finish the job. The man is gone by the time you cover the pit again. Just the faint smell of burned herbs and misplaced optimism lingers in the air. As you trudge toward your next assignment, you pass the town's healer's hut. It's a narrow building with drying plants strung from the eaves and jars in the windows that look suspiciously like reused pickling pots. The healer is a quiet man, rarely seen outside daylight hours. But you've talked to him once or twice, mostly while scrubbing your hands raw in the shared barrel. He told you about the humors, the 4 bodily fluids that allegedly dictated health and mood: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. You nodded politely, even as you realized none of these accounted for what you'd seen bubbling out of the Eastern Quarter's cesspit last winter. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was based more on science or superstition. Some argue that within all the leeches and miasma talk, there were real observations, patterns about air quality, water sources, and proximity to waste. Others think it was mostly educated guesswork, dressed up in Latin. You have no formal education, but you know this. People who live next to overflowing cesspits get sick. People who dump their waste near wells get sick. People who burn dried toad skins to cure toothaches just get smokier toothaches. Once, a barber surgeon offered to bleed you after you complained of chest pain. You declined. You're not a man who shies from blood, but you'd rather not pay someone to take it from you with a knife that's been sitting in a jar of cloudy water since Michaelmas. You make a turn and pause in front of a house with a painted sign, an open eye meant to ward off illness. Underneath it, someone scribbled "not working" in chalk. You laugh out loud for the first time in days. Inside the backyard, the privy is newer, less collapsed, but still ripe. You lift the lid and recoil slightly. Someone's been eating onions, you murmur. Matt gags audibly behind you. I think my nose just retired. You get to work, counting your breaths, keeping them shallow. This one's thick, but not the worst. No dead rats, no heat-swelled gases, no mysterious rainbow slime like the one time behind the cloth dyer's workshop. That one still haunts your dreams. You shovel, you lift, you dump, the wind shifts, and the scent wraps around your head like a blanket from your least favorite uncle. You whisper a quick prayer, not because you're devout, but because some nights, it's the only thing that feels like it might cut through the air. As dawn starts to touch the edge of the sky, you're down to your last load. The city is quiet, in that brief way it always is, before the market starts to rustle. You catch your reflection in a puddle. Muddy face, tired eyes, a streak of something you really hope is just soot. You look like death's overworked janitor. You haul your cart toward the gate, nodding to the early guards. One of them holds a sprig of rosemary under his nose. You don't comment. You dump the final haul in the trench, scrape your tools clean, and stretch until your joints sound like firewood snapping. It's done, for now. The city's walls fade behind you as you steer your cart down the rutted track that leads to the dump grounds. There's dew on the grass and a low mist hanging just above the fields, like the land's trying to stay asleep. It's quiet out here, save for the dull groan of your wheels and the occasional squawk of a disgruntled crow. The worst part of your shift is over technically, but there's still one job left, getting rid of it. You crest a small hill just outside the outermost vegetable plots and see them. The dumping grounds. Not a field, not exactly. More like a reluctant stretch of earth, permanently bruised by human waste. Trench after trench, some filled, some fresh. All of them stinking in their own unique way. The older ones have started to crust over, growing wild grasses that never look quite natural. Like the land is pretending it hasn't been deeply, tragically wronged. This is where it all ends up. The night soil, the overflow, the splatterings and sloshings of 1,000 chamber pots. Your haul, your work, your life, culminating in a dark, steaming pile on the edge of a town that won't speak your name. You roll the cart to your usual spot, a half-dug pit near the broken marker post. Matt helps you steady it while you tip the contents in with practiced precision. It hits the pile with a dense, wet thump, and a low cloud of vapor swirls upward. You both take a synchronized step back. Lovely, Matt mutters. Truly scenic. You shrug. It's honest work. Honest and terrible, he says. You don't disagree. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval waste was commonly dumped on the outskirts of towns, either in designated fields or trenches dug specifically for this purpose. Sometimes it was buried. Sometimes it was just left. And in some cases, it was repurposed. Yes, repurposed. Because here's the truly bizarre bit. Some of this has value. Night soil was used as fertilizer. Not everywhere, not by everyone, and not all the time. But in poorer areas, or for certain crops, it was considered economical. It worked too. Plants don't care about human dignity, they just want nitrogen. Fringe tidbit. Certain guilds even collected and sold night soil to farmers, especially when animal manure was in short supply. There were informal economies built around this stuff. You knew a guy, Garrick, thick neck, 2 teeth, who made a side hustle renting out his trench to cabbage farmers. Claimed he had London's finest fermentation. Got into a shouting match with a tanner once about compost ratios. You still get letters for him. He's been gone 2 years. Matt pokes at the edge of the pile with a stick. You think this ever goes away? You glance at the horizon. Eventually. Like, breaks down, becomes Earth again? Like, the next guy forgets what it was. You begin rinsing the cart, using the small barrel you keep tied beneath. Not much water, just enough to keep things from hardening into sculpture. The rinse water trickles into the trench, darkening the ground. You wonder how many gallons you've dumped into this field. How many years of other people's leftovers. You've spent nights dreaming about it. What happens to the muck? Whether it seeps into the groundwater, poisons a nearby well, or maybe just sits, steaming quietly, waiting for time to erase it. Probably all three. And sometimes, not often, you think about the river, because not every cart makes it to the dump grounds. In a pinch, especially after heavy rains, waste gets diverted, into ditches, into back alleys, and worst of all, into rivers. That's right, your city's lovely little waterway, the one where washerwomen beat clothes and children splash in summer, is, at times, the final resting place for more than just leaves and the occasional unlucky goose. Historians still argue whether dumping into rivers was seen as an emergency measure or just lazy protocol. Some say town councils knew and quietly allowed it. Others argue it was illegal and punishable, but rarely enforced. You've seen both. Some nights, when the dump trench is full and the cart's leaning like it's whispering please, you've taken the long way around, down to the water's edge, and tipped your burden into the current. You're not proud. But when the pit is bubbling and there's lightning in the sky, you think less about policy and more about survival. And the truth? Rivers take everything. They don't argue, they just carry it downstream, past the fishermen and the mills, past the town limits, until someone else's nose has to deal with it. It's a grim sort of mercy, or betrayal, maybe both. You've even heard of rivers changing course because of waste buildup. Not just in your town, but others. London, Bruges, places where population outpaced infrastructure. Piles of waste along the banks change the flow, sometimes permanently. Imagine reshaping nature with nothing but human stubbornness and 1,000 chamber pots. It's both impressive and deeply upsetting. Matt finishes scraping the cart's slats with a bit of old straw. He's muttering a tune, one of those gutter songs about a barmaid and an eel. You tune him out and stare down into the pit. It's full now, almost level with the ground. You pull the covering board into place, tossing a few stones on top. Someone from the council will send boys to fill it with dirt tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever they remember. Sometimes they forget, and when that happens, the smell reminds them. You walk back toward town slowly. The mist is thinning, and early risers are beginning to move. A cart of carrots rumbles past. A girl yawns on a doorstep. Somewhere, a rooster coughs like it's been drinking. You blend into the morning like a bad dream. People avert their eyes. They always do. You understand it now. It's not you. It's what you carry. Even empty, your cart speaks of things no one wants to think about. But they're happy enough to benefit. Happy that their pits are clean, that their streets don't reek, that they can buy bread without stepping through mud that's not just mud. You once tried to explain this to a merchant. He nodded, said, "Important work, that." Then refused to let you touch the bread rolls. But you don't do this for them, not really. You do it because it pays. Because it needs doing. Because someone has to steer the muck away from the center of town and into the fields where it can vanish into memory, or carrot patches, or folklore. The dump is behind you now, so is the worst of the stink. Almost. By mid-morning, the streets have come fully alive again, bustling with carts and clogs and the clatter of too many conversations happening all at once. From the upper windows, laundry flaps like surrender flags. Market stalls bark out smells, fish, onions, hot bread, and honey. The town has woken up and, for the most part, chosen to ignore what you've just done for it. You walk through it all with your head down and your cart mostly empty, though still trailing a faint perfume of last night's labor. You see noses wrinkle, eyes dart away. Someone mutters something under their breath. Not loud enough to be brave, but not quiet enough to go unheard. You don't bother to respond. You've heard it all before. Here comes the gong ghost, one boy whispers to another. You flash a half smile at him, wide-eyed and slow, like a specter sizing up its next target. He bolts behind a sack of potatoes. You chuckle. He'll be fine. Fear is a good teacher. This is the part of the job no one warns you about. Not the lifting or the fumes or the pit-induced nightmares. This. The sideways glances, the sudden silences, the way people seem to look through you instead of at you. You pass the baker, and he pretends to adjust his awning. The blacksmith nods at you politely, without making eye contact. Even the stray dog that used to follow your cart has stopped showing up. It's not personal, it's chemical. Mainstream historical fact. Gong farmers were widely shunned in their own communities despite performing a vital service. Towns needed them desperately, but preferred to pretend they didn't exist. In some places, they were legally required to live in specific quarters or avoid public events altogether. It was one of the few professions where you could be well paid and socially invisible at the same time. You once tried to rent a room closer to the center of town. Cleaner, brighter. The landlord took one look at your boots and slammed the door before you could finish the sentence. That was the third one that week. You've since stopped trying. Now you live near the edge, close enough to walk into town with your cart, far enough to let your smell dissipate before it offends the butter merchant. Your neighbors are quiet mostly. A few tanners, one cobbler with a fondness for garlic and heavy drinking, and a family of weavers who keep to themselves and occasionally leave fresh herbs on your windowsill. It's a strange relationship you have with this city. They need you, but they don't want to be near you. A town of full privies and empty compliments. You reach the fountain in the square and stop to rest. You don't sit. You wouldn't dare. The last time you leaned against a public bench, an old woman fainted, and someone tried to hose you off with dishwater. So you stand quiet, letting the breeze do what it can. Matt shows up a moment later with a meat pie wrapped in paper and a lopsided grin. "Bought two," he says, holding one out. The vendor didn't want your coins. "Lovely," you say. You take the pie anyway. It's warm and smells like spiced lamb and maybe a hint of pity. As you eat, you watch the people pass. And every so often, you catch one of them glancing toward you. Not out of curiosity, but with something closer to guilt. Like they know what you've done for them, but can't quite find the words to say thank you. Or worse, they can find them but choose not to. You remember the time a well-dressed woman asked you to clear a blocked pit under her home. She used a lace kerchief to open the door and avoided your gaze the whole time. But afterward, she left out a plate of cheese and a note that just said, "I'm sorry." You didn't eat the cheese, but you kept the note. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, wealthier townsfolk paid surcharge bribes to have their waste hauled farther out, away from main roads, because even where your waste ended up could affect your social standing. There were gossip circles that whispered about the proximity of your privy trench to a rival's garden. Like sewage-based passive aggression, you and Matt finish your pies in silence. The town watch walks past and nods at you. One of them, Garen, you think, actually smiles. He once helped you pull a drunk scholar out of a collapsed drain. You've shared a drink since then, out back, away from the crowd, friendship by necessity. You get up to go, cart creaking behind you, now light enough to feel almost optimistic. You head back toward your shed, down a side alley where the shadows are longer and the air less judgmental. You pass the apothecary. She's outside arranging jars, doesn't flinch as you approach. She even waves, 2 fingers casual. You wave back, small victories. You pass two children playing with hoops. One of them stops and stares at you, nose twitching. You prepare for a joke or a scream. Instead, she says, "Is it true you saw a rat as big as a cat?" You grin. "Bigger, rode a goose." She gasps, delighted. Her friend squeals and runs off. You wink and keep walking. Somewhere in this town, you're a bedtime story. That's the thing about being the gong farmer. You're not just a person. You're a concept, a warning, a mystery, a necessary embarrassment. Historians still argue whether this occupational ostracism was based entirely on smell, or if it was also about guilt, about the way society offloaded its filth onto someone else, and then pretended that person didn't deserve to be seen. But you know the truth. You are the city's dirty little secret, and secrets, no matter how well paid, tend to live on the edges. You reach your shed, swing open the doors, and wheel the cart inside. The tools go back on their hooks. You brush off your tunic, check your coin pouch, and nod once to yourself. It's not much, but it's enough. The next time someone calls you filth, you're tempted to correct them. Not out loud, of course. That sort of thing leads to trouble, or at the very least, spitting in your direction, and you don't need more mystery fluids on your person. But internally, deeply internally, you want to lean in and say, "No, my friend, I carry filth. I'm better at it than anyone, but me, I'm clean where it counts." It's a nice thought, a bit poetic. You cling to it as you sit in the corner of the shed, pulling off your boots and inspecting your feet like a medic treating the wounded. One toe is turning a color it definitely shouldn't, and your left heel has a blister that could qualify for sainthood if it performs one more miracle by not popping during your shift. Matt's asleep in a pile of rags in the opposite corner, snoring faintly and twitching whenever a cartwheel creaks outside. He dreams of being a merchant someday. Says he'll sell fine combs and silk thread. You never tell him that silk tends to stay away from people who handle waste. Let him dream. You shift and glance toward the small lockbox under your cot. You keep your coin in there, tucked behind a faded scrap of wool that once belonged to your mother. The box doesn't hold much, but more than most would guess for a man who smells like the underside of a summer latrine. Because here's the twist they never expect. Some gong farmers actually did well, really well. Your work is dangerous, disgusting, and isolating, but it's steady, and it pays. And while other jobs vanish when the market dips or crops fail, or kings start flinging taxes around like rice at a wedding, your work is always needed. There's never a shortage of excrement, not in this lifetime. Mainstream historical fact. Well-established gong farmers in larger cities could accumulate significant wealth over time, especially if they held contracts with municipal authorities or large institutions like monasteries or noble estates. The job had low status, but not necessarily low income. Take old Remus, for example. Dead now, collapsed in a privy chute, trying to prove he could still do deep pit work at age 70. But he retired with enough coin to buy 2 cottages and a goat that only responded to Latin commands. Spoke like a peasant, stank like a swamp, but carried himself like he had jewels in his pockets. Because he did. You remember when he took you on your first real job. You'd scooped a few shallow pits, helped haul a cart or 2, but nothing proper. Then one night, he led you to the manor house on Stag's Hollow Lane, handed you the drag hoe and said, "Don't touch your face." You didn't eat for a day after that job. But Remus? He bought the housemaid's leftover pie and a bottle of plum wine, sat by the river, and told you about the time a rat chewed through his belt mid-shift. He laughed so hard he nearly fell in. Fringe tidbit. One legendary gong farmer, known only as Noswald the Keen in local verse, was supposedly able to smell a full pit from over 30 yards away. Townsfolk said he had a nose like a hound and a soul made of brass. The bards wrote a mildly offensive ballad about him. You've only heard it twice, both times sung by people very drunk and trying not to vomit from the chorus. You haven't made Noswald money yet, but you're not poor either. You've got food, a roof, and boots that haven't split open completely. That's more than most weavers and woodcutters can say. And you've got something rarer still, a guarantee. As long as people eat, drink, and sleep, you will be needed. Still, riches come with their own problems. You remember a farmer, simple man, hands like spades, who asked you for a loan after a rough harvest. You gave it to him, quietly, no interest. The next week, his brother accused you of hexing the barley, said the crop failed because you were cursed, and that silver from a gong farmer would rot a man's teeth. You didn't argue, but you never lent again. Reputation, you've learned, is sticky, maybe stickier than anything you've shoveled. You try to keep to yourself. Let the coins pile up like compost in your lockbox, quietly fermenting into something useful. Maybe a second cart, maybe a new wheel, maybe something better for Matt than sleeping in rags and dreaming of silk. But despite the wealth, modest though it is, you are still what they whisper about in the market. Children make up stories about you, that you sleep in pits, that you talk to the waste, that you once fell in and came out smarter. You once heard a fishmonger claim that gong farmers don't bleed red, just a sort of dark, briny soup. You didn't correct her, mostly because you were busy hauling a slop bucket and didn't want to drip on her haddock. It's strange, this invisible fame, the notoriety, the way you're simultaneously feared and forgotten, like a minor god of filth. You once passed a merchant bragging about how far he could throw a stone. You imagined interrupting him just long enough to say, "I once pulled a man out of a flooded cesspit during a thunderstorm." You never did, but the image lingers. Historians still argue whether social stigma surrounding waste work ever softened. Some records suggest certain gong farmers were respected, if not admired, for their bravery, strength, and indispensable service. Others point to sermons that lump them in with thieves and drunkards, claiming their trade stank unto the heavens. You suspect the truth, as always, is both. Outside your shed, the wind picks up. You hear Matt snore again. You shift your legs, stretch your fingers, and look at your hands in the candlelight. Calloused, cracked, slightly discolored from contact with things best left unnamed. And yet, you're richer than half the tanners you know. You've survived collapses, rat nests, and a summer where you cleared a fishmonger's privy that smelled like fermented onions and melted dreams. You've earned every copper, every bruise, every sleepless morning, and in a few years, if the blisters don't claim you, you might just walk away from all this, with savings, with your own land, maybe even a name that doesn't make children gasp or run. Matt stirs. "Do you think I'll ever own a horse?" he mumbles. You pause, then smile. "Only if you don't name it something stupid like Muckface." He grunts, rolls over. You close the lockbox, blow out the candle, and lie down, the scent of earth and ash clinging to everything. You're not a legend yet, but they'll remember your nose. You're standing in a garden, not just any garden, a royal garden. Manicured hedges, carved fountains, and peacocks that look deeply offended by your presence. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a harp plays something so delicate it feels like it might evaporate. It's the kind of place where the air smells like roses and old money, and your boots absolutely, unmistakably do not belong. But you're here because even kings have to go. Specifically, they have to go somewhere, and that somewhere is called a garderobe. Garderobe. Such a fancy word, isn't it? Sounds like it might be a noble title, or a fancy robe made of goose feathers, but no. It's a privy, a royal toilet, usually a small room with a wooden seat and a shaft that drops down to a waste chute or a pit. Sometimes it drains into a moat, sometimes onto the heads of passing servants, if the angle's wrong and the engineering's overconfident. And you're here to clean it. Mainstream historical fact. Royal castles and noble houses had garderobes instead of chamber pots, often built into the castle walls, with waste chutes leading outside or into cesspits. These weren't cleaned by the royals, of course. That honor fell to staff, and occasionally to someone like you, hired in discreet desperation when the usual servant refused to go near the shaft. You approach the castle's side entrance, escorted by a man in velvet who refuses to meet your eyes, but also refuses to walk beside you. He's leading you to the Queen's West garderobe, which, by his reluctant account, has begun to smell like death steeped in turnip wine. You nod. That's an improvement over last week's description. As if a bishop's conscience had curdled in a boot. The corridor you walk through is absurdly clean. Tiled floors, stone columns, tapestries that probably cost more than your cart. You pass a painted saint who looks deeply uncomfortable, possibly because he can smell you through the wall, and then you arrive. It's a narrow room with a small window, an ornately carved wooden seat, and a faint breeze that does absolutely nothing. The scent is precisely what the Velvet Man described. Worse even. You kneel, gently open the seat, and peer into darkness. It peers back. This is not a simple pit job. This is an angled chute system, which means someone built this with the illusion of convenience. It leads down the castle wall into a blind corner of the garden. You saw the stain on your way in, hidden behind a rose bush that is definitely not blooming this season. You lower your inspection mirror, yes, you carry one, don't ask, and confirm your suspicions. The chute is blocked, possibly by a poorly digested goose, or maybe just the passage of time and royal negligence. You get to work. The angle is awkward, but you manage to insert a length of iron rod into the chute and begin scraping. The smell rises like an offended ghost. You suppress a gag and keep going. You hear something shift, something wet. Then, thunk, a blockage gives way. You step back just in time to avoid a wave of something you're going to label as not your problem anymore. There's a hiss from below, as if the castle is sighing with relief. You hope it is. Fringe tidbit. Royal guardrobes were often built directly above castle walls or moats, under the belief that flowing water would carry away waste. In practice, many moats became stagnant cesspools, ripe with bacteria and frogs that looked permanently disgusted. Some courtiers refused to sit unless their servant first dropped a stone down the chute to dislodge surprises. You heard that one from a cleaner at Elwick Keep. Said the moat fish there glowed in the dark, probably just slime, probably. Back inside the castle, the Velvet Man hands you a small pouch without speaking. You peek inside. Silver. Clean. Probably never touched air before this moment. You pocket it and leave quietly. No one thanks you. No one offers you a drink or a bite to eat. But a maid crosses herself as you pass, and another tucks her apron tighter like it might protect her from your aura. You smile at her. She nearly drops a tray. This is your rare glimpse into the lives of the rich. Not the gold or feasts, but their waste, their secrets, their diets. You once cleared a nobleman's garderobe and found the bones of a roasted lark, still whole. Another time, a tiny carved figurine that might have been part of a chess set, or a very strange apology. And once, memorably, a love letter written on fine vellum that had clearly been flushed in a fit of drama. You read it, then burned it. You're many things, but not a gossip. Historians still argue whether the presence of garderobes represented progress in sanitation or simply relocated the problem. After all, if your moat becomes a latrine, have you really advanced or just rebranded your filth as landscaping? You pass through the castle gates as the guards nod stiffly. One of them offers you a rag, holds it out at arm's length like he's feeding a bear. You accept it. You wipe your hands. Back in the street, you catch Matt waiting near a tavern. He looks at you like he's not sure whether to congratulate you or call for help. You smell like royalty, he says finally. Better than smelling like the royal problem, you reply. You both laugh, a rare sound. He tells you someone down by the Guildhall wants a pit cleared before a wedding feast. You nod. Work is work. But as you walk, you glance back once at the castle. The stone walls gleam in the morning light. Flags flutter above windows with glass panes finer than anything you'll ever own. They live in luxury, you live in the muck. And yet, when they panic, when they overflow, when their carefully hidden systems back up, they call you, not their steward, not their priest, you, and that, in a strange, filthy, slightly triumphant way, feels like power. You're woken by silence, which is odd, because most mornings are full of something. Bells, carts, Matt falling over his own boots. But today, nothing. Just still air and the faint scent of yesterday clinging to your blanket like a guest that won't leave. You sit up slowly. Your muscles protest as usual. Your knees make a sound you're pretty sure you've heard in a butcher's shop. But there's something different in the air today. Not the smell. That's still terrible. No, it's something missing. Then you remember. The notice on the chapel door. The meeting. The big one. The council's been whispering for months now about new ideas. About pipes. About drainage. About the possibility of a future that doesn't require people like you crawling through humanity's leftovers, one night at a time. You throw on your tunic, still damp at the cuffs, and step into the morning light. It's too bright. The kind of day that tries too hard to pretend the city is clean. You make your way to the square. There's a crowd, not massive, but enough to block your view of the raised platform, where a man in fresh robes is gesturing dramatically next to a model made of wood, string, and what appears to be half a rain barrel. He's talking about pipes. Underground channels, sealed and smooth, that carry waste away from homes without the need for carts, shovels, or the word gong spoken in public. You lean on your cart and listen. Mainstream historical fact. By the 15th century and especially into the 16th, some European cities began experimenting with more advanced sanitation. Stone drains, covered pipes, water flushing systems. It was the beginning of the end for professions like yours. Slowly, but surely, the world decided it didn't want to see or smell what it had so long ignored. They say waste will go under the city, Matt whispers beside you. He showed up at some point, chewing on an apple core. Disappears. No more carts, no more trenches. You grunt. Nothing ever really disappears. He shrugs. Sounds easier. You glance at the speaker. He's talking about public hygiene. He uses words like innovation and modernity like they've just been invented. He doesn't look like someone who's ever held a drag hoe. His hands are clean. The townsfolk murmur. Some nod. Others frown. A baker mutters about expense. A fishwife hisses that if waste goes underground, it'll come up in the wells. You hear both sides. You understand both sides. Fringe tidbit. In some towns that installed early sewers, the pipes ran uphill by accident, or were built so shallow that they backed up during heavy rain. The result? Indoor fountains of horror. You once met a man from Bristol who swore his cousin's privy exploded during a summer storm. He never used the indoors again. You step away from the crowd, not out of pride, out of habit. You've been on the edges for years. This moment isn't yours. Not really. But it might be the beginning of the end. You walk the streets and notice little signs. Gutter stones pulled up. Trenches dug with no pit in sight. New buildings with odd little spouts near the base. You see men laying clay pipes, muttering about angle and slope. You see plans nailed to walls with drawings that make your job look like a fossil. This city is changing, and slowly it's leaving you behind. You return to your shed that night and sit for a long while. The tools hang where they always have. The cart leans, patient and battered. The smell is comforting, in a way you're not ready to admit. Matt sits near the doorway. He says nothing for a while. Then, what'll you do if they stop needing us? You don't answer right away. You don't know. You've spent your life hauling the city's waste. You've been the hands and the back and the lungs of a service no one wanted to talk about but couldn't live without. You were the silence under the noise, and now that silence is being engineered out of existence. Historians still argue whether the death of the gong farmer was a blessing or a quiet tragedy. Some say it was progress, the march toward cleaner, healthier cities. Others say it erased a class of people who had value, skill, and a kind of dignity that didn't fit in polite society. You stare at your tools and wonder, were you just a stopgap? A necessary evil? Or the unsung hero of a city too ashamed to thank you properly? You decide it doesn't matter, because for now, the pipes aren't in every house, the new system isn't ready, and people still have to go. You've got one more round tonight, a few more pits, maybe more after that. You'll keep going until the cart rusts, the last rope breaks, or someone finally remembers to build a statue of a man holding a bucket and a scowl. You stand, stretch, and grab your gloves. Matt follows. You may not be the future, but you're still what works. Your boots make a soft squelch as they press into the earth, damp from last night's rain, softer than usual, and laced with the faint, musky tang of the nearby trench. There's no moon tonight, only a dull blanket of gray above, barely bright enough to cast a shadow. It suits your mood. There's an ending in the air. Not dramatic, not loud, just settling. You've done this walk 1,000 times, down past the blacksmiths, right at the crooked elm, across the narrow footbridge where the boards creak like they're whispering secrets. But this time it feels slower. The cart rolls behind you, only half loaded, its familiar rattle more hollow now. Matt's off tonight. His cousin's getting married or remarried, or maybe just celebrating a day without rats in the flour. You didn't ask, so it's just you, just the cart, just the path. You arrive at your last stop, a small courtyard behind the glassblower's shop. The pit's old, rimmed with stone, gone slick with moss. You've cleared it before. It's polite as pits go. No surprises, no bites, no broken beams. Just honest waste, waiting to be hauled. You open the lid. The scent is what you expect. Heavy, earthy, edged with the tang of ash and pears, maybe. You've gotten good at this, identifying meals from memory. You work in silence, no splashing, just scoop and haul. The rhythm calms your thoughts. It always has. When the pit's finally empty, you sit on the stone rim for a moment, not caring that your boots are wet, that your back protests. You look up at the night, still no stars. You wonder briefly if the pipes will reach this corner of town. Probably not right away. Mainstream historical fact. Even as sanitation technology advanced, poorer districts and edge communities were often the last to benefit. Privies and cesspits remained long after the elite had switched to water closets and proper drains. The work continued, quietly, without thanks. You close the lid and give it a soft pat, like you're tucking something in. The cart is heavier now, but manageable. You begin the final walk to the dump trench, passing shuttered windows and flickering lanterns. A cat watches you from a rooftop. A chimney sways in the wind like a sleepy sentinel. You think about retiring. Not the dramatic kind, not dropping your shovel in the square and declaring you're done. No, just fading, doing fewer shifts, letting the younger ones take over, letting your boots dry out for once. You've saved enough if you're careful. Maybe a patch of land, a goat, a small orchard if you're lucky, a life without carts and spills and middle-of-the-night collapses. Maybe. The trench is waiting, half filled from the last few days. You tip the cart slowly, letting the waste slide out with a soft, reluctant sigh. Steam rises in the cold. You don't flinch anymore. You just watch it disappear into the earth. Fringe tidbit. One medieval folktale tells of a Gong farmer who buried a coin in every trench he ever dumped, claiming the land would rise again, rich with treasure. Centuries later, when the trench was dug up to build a new market, all they found were bits of wood and a carved token that read, "Nice try." You like that story, not because it's true, but because it could be. You rest your hands on the cart and breathe in slowly. Even now, even after everything, you can still find the scent of wet grass beneath it all. Life, refusing to be drowned. Historians still argue whether the end of your profession was liberation or erasure, whether the pipes were a blessing or a slow betrayal, whether the world lost something when it stopped looking its waste in the face. You think it doesn't matter, because for you it was never about legacy. It was about the work, and now the work is done. You walk home slowly, savoring the quiet, the way the wind hums through the alleyways like a lullaby. Only the bricks remember. You pass shuttered doors, a single candle flickering in an upstairs window, the sound of someone snoring through a cracked pane. At your shed, you wipe your boots one last time before stepping inside. The tools hang on their hooks. Your cot waits, warm from your absence. You light a stub of candle, watch it flicker. You think about washing up, then you think about not. You sit on the edge of the cot, rubbing your shoulder, tracing the callus on your thumb, where the shovel handle's worn a groove into your skin. The city sleeps, and this time it really doesn't need you. Not tonight, maybe not again. You lie back, staring at the ceiling, and close your eyes. Just a few more minutes awake. Just to listen, to breathe, to remember the weight of the cart and the quiet of the trench, and the strange, steady satisfaction of a pit emptied and a street left clean. And as your mind begins to drift, your body already relaxing into the rhythm of sleep, the smell fades, not from the air, but from your thoughts, until all that's left is the soft creak of the cart and the sound of boots on damp earth. Slow, even, done. Let yourself settle now. The streets are still, the carts are empty. You've walked through the dark and carried what no one else would. You've kept the city from tipping into chaos, night after night, without applause or torchlight. And now, the weight is off your shoulders, the pits are quiet, the shovel rests. Outside, the wind brushes the rooftops like a gentle hand smoothing a sleeping child's hair. You're far from the noise now, far from the smells, just cool air, warm blanket, and the hush of a world that no longer needs your footsteps tonight. There's nothing left to haul, nothing to lift, no one watching, only the dark and the breath and the soft sense of being finished. So sink deeper now, into the straw, into the quiet, into rest. Sweet dreams and good night.